हेलो श्रुति, अपने को अनम्यूट करो थोड़ा देर के लिए। क्या दबाने से भी आया? अच्छा जी, ऑडियो कुछ लगे आवाज आ रही है श्रुति। हाँ, हम पढ़ा रहे हैं लेसन 1। आवाज आ रही है ना? फुटप्रिंट्स विदाउट फीट, पेज नंबर 3। कोई हाँ बोल दो। म्यूट करो अपने आप को। कोई हाँ बोल दो तो हम आगे बोले।
यस सर।
आवाज आ रही है ना मेरी?
यस सर।
आप पेज नंबर 3 निकालो तो। जहाँ लिखा है द सर्जरी द हाउसहोल्ड डॉग सर्ज अराउंड मी, Ricky looked down at the noisy pack with dull eyes, and when put down lay motionless on the carpet. The other dogs, after sniffing round him, कर दीजिए रिकॉर्ड दबाए फिर मोर मिला रिकॉर्ड करा रिकॉर्डिंग में मोर मिला। हाँ नोट कर दो जितना बचा रहे मोर में जाके रिकॉर्ड को। ठीक है, चल रहा पढ़ाते हैं। ओके हाँ ठीक है, ओके हाँ वेरी गुड। See the page number 3, lesson number 1, footprints without feet. Really, the doctor Herward did not do any surgery. There was a room, surgery room, but there he put the dog there, and with the other dogs, he was giving the chess to the dogs. At the surgery, the household dogs surged around me. Okay, so many dogs were there. They were moving around the doctor. Tricky looked down at the noisy pack. Pack means group of the dogs. First of all, Tricky was not accommodated there. He was not habituated to live there. With dull eyes, he was suffering from obesity. He was so fat, overfat. His eyes were dull. Water was coming out from his eyes. When put down, lay motionless on the carpet. On the carpet, he was stable, doing no any motion. हिंदी में भी बताते हैं, जो गया ट्रिकी वहां तो कोई भी गतिविधि नहीं कर रहा है, 1-2 दिन एकदम चुपचाप है। The other dogs, after slipping around him for a few seconds, जो दूसरे डॉग थे वो आते थे फिर घूम के चले जाते थे। Decided he was an uninteresting object and ignored him. No any dog was taking interest in Tricky. They were coming, they were thinking this is uninteresting dog. I made up a bed for him in a warm loose box next to the one where the other dogs slept. So many dogs were sleeping, and near that he made one place bed for Tricky also. For 2 days I kept an eye on him. The doctor was watching him, watching the activity of Tricky, giving him no food but plenty of water. The doctor was not giving any food, he was only giving him water. At the end of the second day, he started to show some interest in his surroundings. First of all, Tricky was not taking any interest in anyone, even to the doctor, even the other dogs. But after 2 days, he started to take interest. On the third, he began to whimper. Whimper means cry, bark. When he heard the dogs in the yard, yard means open place. When he was looking at the other dogs, and when he was listening the other dogs, then he was crying. When I opened the door, Tricky trotted out and was immediately engulfed by me. There was other dog, Joe. Joe is a minor character. The grey hound, he was one type of grey color. Hound means hunting dog. And his friends, after rolling him over and thoroughly inspecting him, their other dogs, they were watching Tricky and they were rolling him. It means they were fighting with him. The dogs moved off down the garden. This dog Tricky was not doing anything, but the other dogs, they were disturbing him. Tricky followed them, rolling slightly with his surplus fat, and Tricky could not run fast because he was very fat. But after that also he was trying to walk. हिंदी में थोड़ा बोलते हैं, ट्रिकी दौड़ नहीं पा रहा था, उसको दूसरे कुत्ते आकर के परेशान करते थे, परेशान करके भाग जाते थे. अब ट्रिकी का एक ही तरीका था, उसको खाना कम देना है, because the mistress of the tricky had given over nutrition, over food. अब उसको खाना कम देगा और क्या देगा? वाटर, पानी होगी. Later that day I was present at feeding time. I watched while Tristan, there is the other character, Tristan. He is the staff of his minor character. He is the staff of that hospital, that clinic. His duty was to give the food to the dogs, slap the food into the balls. In the so many balls were there, he put the food. There was a usual headlong rush followed by the sounds of high-speed eating. Now there was not one bowl, but all the balls were mixed. Those dogs, they were fat, they were healthy, they were strong. Only they were running and they were catching the food. Every dog knew that if he fell behind the other, he was liable to have some competition for the last part of his meal. There was a tough competition for the food. And Tricky was overfed, he could not take his food. Now page number 4. Lesson 1, footprints without feet, page number 4. You can see one picture is given. All the dogs are running behind Tricky. When they had finished means their work was finished. What work? Eating work. Tricky took a walk around the shining balls. Tricky could not run fast. He was only making round, licking casually inside one or two of them. All the food was eaten by the other dogs. Only Tricky was licking them. Licking means in Hindi chatna. There was no food left. For the food also there was struggle. Next day an extra bowl was put out for him, and I was pleased to see him jostling means pushing his way towards it. One extra bowl was kept for Tricky, and now Tricky was struggling for the food. From then on, his progress was rapid. Now there was a progress in the health of Tricky, because 2 days he did not take food, he was only drinking water, so now he was becoming something less fat. Not a good progress, but something, some activity was. He had no medicinal treatment of any kind, but all day he ran about the dog. That doctor, Mr. Herbert, he knew that the medicine was not working there. By surgery, by medicine, that dog could not become well. But only thing was exercise. So now the dog was running behind the other dogs for the food, and this was the exercise. Joining in their friendly scrimmage is struggle. For the food also there was a struggle. He discovered the joy of being bowled over. Bowled over means thrown over. Other dogs, they were fighting and they were throwing Tricky. Tramped on and squashed every few minutes. And squash means pressed. They were pressing that dog, Tricky, joining in their. He became an accepted member of the gang. Gang means group of the dogs. First of all, no any dog was accepting him, but now he was accepted. Member, uh, silky little object among the shaggy crew. Crew means group. Shaggy means hairy. Fighting like a tiger. Now, that dog Tricky, first of all, he was coward, he was lazy, he was overfed, but now he was fighting like a tiger. What for? For the food. For his share at meal time, in the food time, all the dogs were eating, and for his share, he was struggling. Who? Tricky. Uh, for share meal time and hunting rats in the old hen house at night. In the night, all the other dogs, they were also hunting the rat. This Tricky was also hunting the rat. So many, rat is the interesting thing. They really, the dogs are not eating, but they are killing the rats. He had never had such a time in his life. And in the life, whole life, that dog had no such type of active. He had not been active in his life. Always he was taking rest and always he was getting food. But for the first time in the hospital of Mr. Herbert, the dog Tricky got the exercise. थोड़ा हिंदी बोल देते हैं. ट्रिकी को एक्सरसाइज मिला सफिशिएंट, पानी मिला, खाना मिलता था लेकिन स्ट्रगल के बाद. ये नहीं कि खाना रखा हुआ है जैसे अपने घर में खाता था ट्रिकी. देखेंगे पैराग्राफ 23 है, पेज 4 है. All the while Mrs. Pumphrey hovered anxiously in the background. And here Mrs. Pumphrey, she could not live without that dog. She was always waiting. She was always moving. She was coming in the hospital and she was moving here and there. She wanted to see her dog, Tricky, ringing a dozen times a day. And when she was not in the hospital, from her house, she was talking on the phone and she was asking about the news about that dog. Bulletins means news. I dodged the questions about whether the cushions were being turned regularly. That was a question. That the sitting arrangement, sleeping arrangement of the dog was good or not, cushions were changed or not. But the doctor was not giving any answer because he was not giving good facility. Why? Because he knew that the dog wanted exercise. There was no need of facility and over facility. Are his correct quote worn according to the weather? There was a question from Mrs. Pumphrey. Mrs. Pumphrey was owner of the dog, Tricky. Question was the bed was good or not, his coat, his clothes were changed or not. The doctor was not giving any answer. But I was able to tell her that little fellow was out of danger and convulsing rapidly. Convulsing means uh, recovering. So there was a question of Mrs. Pembury that dog was becoming well or not, and there was an answer that he was recovering very well. हिंदी थोड़ा बोलते हैं. मिसेज पेम्परे बहुत फोन करती थी, उसके खाने के बारे में पूछती थी, पहनने के बारे में पूछती थी, उसके बेड के बारे में पूछती थी. मिस्टर हेरवर्ट कोई आंसर नहीं देता था. ही वाज नॉट गिविंग एनी आंसर. केवल इतना ही बोलता था कि हाँ, खतरा से बाहर है, कुत्ता पर कोई खतरा नहीं. कोई समझ गया था कि इसका उपचार क्या है, ओनली वाटर एंड एक्सरसाइज, और वही दे रहा था, एक्सरसाइज एंड वाटर. आगे चलते हैं. ऑल द व्हाइल the word convulsing seemed to do something Mrs. Pumphrey, and Mrs. Pumphrey was now very satisfied with the answer of Mr. Herward. She started to bring round fresh eggs 2 dozen at a time. She brought 12 dozens of 12 eggs, 2 dozen eggs for the dog. But really, who was eating that food? Doctor was eating. To build up Tricky's strength, she was thinking that Tricky was a weak dog. Really, he was not weak. He was overfed. So much food was the food giving was the problem. So she brought eggs. For a happy period, my partners and I had 2 eggs each for the breakfast. The eggs were brought for the dog, but the eggs were eaten by the compounder, the doctor. Uh, for a happy period, my partners and I had 2 eggs each for breakfast. But when the bottles of wine began to arrive, there was wine also. For the dog also, special wine was brought by Mrs. Pembrose. To build up Tricky arrived, the real possibilities of the situation began to dawn on the household. Now, she was thinking, Mrs. Pembre was thinking that dog was eating all the things, eggs, drinking the wine. But matter was different. The doctor was eating. थोड़ा सा हिंदी बोलता है. वो बहुत ज्यादा भोजन भेजती थी, एग्स भेजती थी, वाइन भेजती थी. वो सोचती थी कि खाएगा पिएगा डॉग, वो डॉग थोड़ा मजबूत हो जाएगा ट्रिकी, लेकिन कोई खाना उसको नहीं देता था डॉक्टर. सारा अपने खा जाता था, उसको केवल पानी देता था. It was to enrich Tricky's blood. Lunch became a ceremonial occasion with 2 glasses of wine before and several during the meal. Now the lunchtime, in the lunchtime, the dog was not taking the lunch, but the doctor was taking eggs, wine. Page number 5 पर आएंगे. टॉप पर देखेंगे. We could hardly believe it when the brandy came to put a final age on Tricky's constitution. यह constitution का मतलब structure से है. To make the body of the dog strong, she sent brandy, eggs, wine. For a few nights, the final spirit was rolled around, inhaled and reverently drunk. And in the night, all that wine, brandy was drunk by the doctor. All the eggs They were eaten by the doctor. What is the name of the doctor? Mr. Edward. He is the narrator also, he is writer also, he is the doctor also. वेटनरी डॉक्टर. थोड़ा सा हिंदी बोलोगे क्लियर हो जाएगा. वो मिसेज पेम्फ्री सोचती है कि उसका डॉग खा रहा है फूड, एग्स खा रहा है, ब्रांडी पी रहा है, डॉग को कुछ नहीं दिया जा रहा, उसको एक्सरसाइज दिया जा रहा है, उसको पानी दिया जा रहा है. डॉक्टर समझता था कि क्या फूड देना चाहिए. वो ज्यादा प्यार में मोटा हो गया था, ज्यादा खिलाती थी. They were days of deep content, starting well with the extra egg in the morning, improved and sustained by the midday wine, and finishing luxuriously around the fire with the bread. Really, early in the morning, in the breakfast, the eggs were brought for the dog, and for the midday, the wine was brought by the Mrs. Pembre. But all the things were eaten by the doctor. वो समझती थी कि उसका डॉग जो है मजबूत हो जाएगा, ब्रांडी पिएगा, एग्स खाएगा, लेकिन कुछ नहीं, उसका एक ही दवा था, वाटर और एक्सरसाइज. It was temptation to keep Tricky on as a permanent guest. Now the doctor wanted to keep Tricky as a guest because till that time Tricky was there. The eggs, the wine, the brandy, all things will be would be available by the owner of the mistress of the dog Tricky. But I knew Mrs. Pemfrey was suffering, and after a fortnight means 15 days, I felt compelled to phone and tell her that the little dog had recovered and was awaiting collection. Daily, that lady was talking on the phone, asking about the dog. The doctor was tired by her phone. So at last, after 15 days, he said that you take your dog away. 15 दिन के बाद कुछ उसका फैटनेस कम हुआ, डॉक्टर उसको कुछ स्वस्थ कर दिया, पानी पिला के, एक्सरसाइज करा के, खाना देता था बहुत कम, खाना संघर्ष के बाद मिलता था. All the dogs were running, and who was brave dog, who was strong dog, that dog was taking the food. Within minutes, about 30 feet of gleaming black metal drove up outside the surgery. About 30 feet gleaming black metal, this is a car. That lady was very rich. She came by the car to take the dog. The chauffeur means driver, private driver, opened the door, and I could just make out the figure of Mrs. Pemfrey almost lost in the interior. Mrs. Pemfrey came, and she was lost to look the hospital. She was lost to look her car. Her hands were tightly clasped in front of her. Her lips trembled. Oh, Mr. Herbert, do tell me the truth. Is he really better? She was over worried about the dog. She was asking that Mr. Herbert is the doctor, writer, storyteller, narrator. She was asking that is my dog good? Yeah, he is fine. There is no need for you to get out of the car. I shall go and fetch him. Really, in the hospital, what was the condition? The doctor did not want to show. So he told Mrs. Bamfre that you should be here. I will bring the dog. Really, the dog was not respected there. The dog was ignored. The dog was, you can say, punished by the doctor. And because of that punishment, that dog became good. I walked through the house into the garden. A mass of dogs was hurtling round and round the lawn, and their midst, ears flapping, tail waving, was the little golden figure of Tricky. All the dogs were playing, running, and their Tricky was also there. In 2 weeks, he had been transformed into a lith. Lith is a flexible, hard muscle animal. First of all, he was a fat dog, but only in 15 days exercise, the dog was flexible. He was keeping up well with the pack, stretching out in great bounds. Bounds means jumps. His chest almost brushing the ground. First of all, when he was fat, he could not walk also. But now the same dog was walking, running. The dog was good now. I carried him back along the passage to the front of the house. The chauffeur was still holding the car door. Chauffeur is the private driver. Open, and when Tricky saw his mistress, he took off from my arms in a tremendous leap and sailed into Mrs. Pemfrey's lap. The dog was also hungry for the love. He also wanted to see his mistress. And the mistress, Mrs. Pumphrey, she was also hungry for the dog. The dog jumped and went into the lap of the mistress. She gave a startled ooh and then had to defend herself as he swarmed over her, licking her face and barking. The dog, Tricky, was loving that mistress. He was licking the face of his mistress, Mrs. Pumphrey. अब वो कुत्ता चला गया उसके घर, कार में गया, जाते ही बहुत ज्यादा प्यार दिखाया वो दोनों ने. The dog Tricky showed the love to mistress Mrs. Pumphrey. Mrs. Pumphrey showed the love to dog. Second last paragraph, page 6. During the excitement, I helped the chauffeur to bring out the beds, toys, cushions, coats, and balls, none of which had been used. जितना सामान आया था कोई यूज नहीं हुआ, कोई गद्दा वगैरह balls वगैरह सब ऐसे ही पड़ा हुआ. So what the things were there? Toys, cushions, coats, balls. Nothing was used. She had sent, Mrs. Pumphrey had sent, she was thinking the dog needed it. But the doctor knew that there was no need of all these facilities. Because of the over facilities, because of the over comfort, the dog could not become well. As the car moved away, Mrs. Pumphrey leaned out of the window, tears shone in her eyes, her lips trembled. She was weeping. She was weeping because of love. She thought that the doctor was good, the doctor has made the surgery, and the surgery was successful, and so she was very happy. Last paragraph. Oh, Mr. Hereward, she cried, how can I ever thank you? This is a triumph of surgery. This is the irony. ये पूरा व्यंग है. उसको लगता है कि इतना बड़ा चेंज नहीं आ सकता. कुछ क्वेश्चन आंसर्स हैं, इसका हम आप लोगों को लिखवा देंगे इसमें. क्लास में, ऑफलाइन क्लास में हम क्वेश्चन आंसर लिखवा देंगे, अभी डिस्कस कर देते हैं. पहला क्वेश्चन है, व्हाट काइंड ऑफ पर्सन डू यू थिंक द नरेटर ए वेटरनरी सर्जन इज? ही इज वेरी हेल्पफुल पर्सन, ही इज ए सोशल पर्सन, ही इज ए मैन ऑफ कॉमन सेंस. कॉमन सेंस लिखना पड़ेगा. Would you say he is tactful? आप कहिए yes. As well as full of common sense? कहिए yes. The dog was very social person. उसका बिहेवियर कितना अच्छा था. मिसेज पंपरी को पता भी नहीं कि डॉग जो है, डॉग के साथ उतना स्ट्रिक्टनेस से वो पेश आया है. वो तो समझ रहा है कि ऑपरेशन होगा. डू यू थिंक ट्रिकी वॉज हैप्पी टू गो होम? आपको क्या लगता है कि ट्रिकी घर जाकर के खुश हुआ? व्हाट डू यू थिंक विल हैपन नाउ? तो आप कहेंगे इन द बिगिनिंग ही वॉज हैप्पी, बट अगेन ही वॉज नॉट हैप्पी बिकॉज मिसेज पेम्फ्री वुड गिव फूड अगेन एंड अगेन ही विल बी इल. ज्यादा के आवश्यकता से अधिक केयर करना खतरा. तीसरा क्वेश्चन, डू यू थिंक दिस इज ए रियल लाइफ एपिसोड और मेयर ए फिक्शन? आई थिंक हियर इज समथिंग फिक्शन एंड समथिंग इज रियल. आर इज इट ए मिक्सचर ऑफ बोथ? मिक्सचर ऑफ बोथ. कहानी दो तीन तरह का होता है. कुछ कहानी काल्पनिक होती है और कुछ कहानी रियल होती है. आई थिंक दिस स्टोरी इज रियल आल्सो, समथिंग इमेजिनेशन आल्सो. जो इसमें कल्पना किया गया है, व्यंग है, उसमें तो जरूर कुछ ना कुछ वो है, कल्पना है, कुछ रियलिटी. अगला क्वेश्चन पेज नंबर 7 पर है. दिस एपिसोड डिस्क्राइब्स द सिली बिहेवियर ऑफ ए रिच वुमन who is foolishly indulgent. Indulgent means ready to gratify, not strict. Perhaps because she is lonely. वो औरत उतना क्यों प्यार कर रही थी डॉक्टर से, उससे डॉग से? She was alone. I think her husband, she was separated from her husband. I think she had no any son and daughter. So everything was dog. वो कुत्ता ही उसके लिए सब कुछ था. Do you think such people are merely silly? क्या आपको लगता है कि मूर्ख है वो लेडी? और कैन देयर एक्शंस कॉज देम टू अदर्स? हम तो को लगता है कि वो सिली. इतना ज्यादा प्यार कर रही है डॉग से, उतना ज्यादा किसी गरीब को करती, किसी मजदूर को, किसी नीडी आदमी को उतना खाना खिलाती तो कितने लोगों का भला हो जाता जितना वो कुत्ते को प्यार करती. दूसरा क्वेश्चन देखेंगे. डू यू थिंक देयर आर आल्सो पेरेंट्स लाइक मिसेज पेम्फ्रे? आपका ये यस. क्या ऐसे पेरेंट्स हैं जो अपने बेटे को बहुत ज्यादा प्यार करते हैं? हैं ऐसे पेरेंट्स, बहुत प्यार करते हैं. टीचर छू भी दिया बच्चे को तो झगड़ा करने आ जाता है कि हाँ हाँ हमारा बच्चा इतना प्यारा है, बदमाशी नहीं करता. खाना बहुत देते हैं, ज्यादा खाने पीने से बच्चे बीमार हो जाते हैं. ओवर न्यूट्रिशन इज आल्सो बैड थिंग. आप घर में जाइए और उधर खूब फल रखा हुआ, खूब ज्यादा विटामिन रखा हुआ, देखिए करके आपका मन नहीं घबरा जाएगा क्या खाए ना खाए। भूख लगी हुई है तब खाए, तब आप स्वस्थ रहेंगे। अगला क्वेश्चन है, व्हाट वुड यू हैव डन इफ यू वेयर ए मेंबर ऑफ द स्टाफ इन मिसेज पेम्प्री हाउस होल्ड? आप क्या करते अगर आप वहां रहते तो? आई वुड बी स्ट्रिक्ट। मैं सलाह देता हूँ उसको, मिसेज पेम्प्री को, कि मैडम डोंट गिव सो मच फूड टू द डॉग। ये नेबर, आप पड़ोसी होते तो क्या करते? सेम काम करते। आई कुड सजेस्ट दैट लेडी दैट यू शुड नॉट गिव सो मच फूड टू दैट डॉग। व्हाट वुड योर लाइफ हैव बीन लाइक इन जनरल? समान रूप से आपका जिंदगी कैसा होता? माई लाइफ शुड बी सिंपल, आई शुड नॉट गिव सो मच लव टू द डॉग। लास्ट क्वेश्चन, फोर्थ नंबर, व्हाट वुड यू हैव डन इफ यू वेयर इन द नरेटर्स प्लेस? आप नरेटर की जगह पर रहते तो क्या करते? आई वुड डू द सेम what the narrator did. Narrator कौन है? अंशिका, who is the narrator? कोई सुन भी रहा है कि हम अकेले बोलते जा रहे हैं? Who is narrator? Ruma Singh. Narrator is Mr. Herward. He is doctor also. अगला चैप्टर, ये कहानी हो गया। अगला चैप्टर बहुत बढ़िया है, फिफ्थ स्टोरी, चोर की कहानी। एक चोर है जो नौकर बन करके आता। दो ही इसमें मेजर कैरेक्टर है, एक हरि सिंह है, एक अनिल है, दूसरे चैप्टर में। हरि सिंह अपना नाम बदलता रहता है, अनिल बहुत अच्छा आदमी है, सीधा साधा है, सिंपल मैन है। तो इस कहानी में मैसेज है, यू कैन इम्प्रूव एनी पर्सन बाय द लव एंड ट्रस्ट। किसी को आप सुधार सकते हैं प्यार से, डांट फटकार के नहीं। इसका कहानी थोड़ा सा बताते हैं, तब तक टाइम भी हो जाएगा। देयर इज ए thief, Hari Singh, he is always changing his name because he wanted to keep himself safe from the police. He was thief, हमेशा चोरी करता है। He made friendship with Anil. He did not know how to cook the food, but he told a lie that he cooked the food. He did not know how to cook the tea, but he told a lie that he cooked the tea. And he was working under Anil. Anil was giving so much care. One day, Anil got some money, and that Hari Singh stole the money in the night, and he ran away. And he went to the uh, at the railway station. He wanted to catch the train, but he left the train. He did not catch the train. He returned to his owner, Mr. Anil, and he early in the morning, Anil gave him salary 50 rupees, 600 rupees he has earned. He was a writer. Anil was a writer, and at last, because of the Anil's care, Anil's love, the uh, Anil's love, the thief became a good man. ये कहानी है फिफ्थ स्टोरी में। आप लोगों के पास किताब है तो थोड़ा देखेंगे। पहला क्वेश्चन है, हु इज द आई इन दिस स्टोरी? आई इसमें हरि सिंह है। हरि सिंह अपना कहानी सुनाता है। व्हाट वाज ही? ए फेयरली सक्सेसफुल हैंड। ये ही कौन है? वही हरि सिंह। वो किस चीज में बहुत एक्सपर्ट था? चोरी के, चोरी बहुत करता था। तो व्हाट डज ही गेट फ्रॉम अनिल इन रिटर्न ऑफ हिज वर्क? अपने काम के लिए वो क्या पाता था? थोड़ा सा पैसा पाता था, थोड़ा पैसा चोरी भी करता था, थोड़ा सा पैसा। आई वॉज स्टिल ए थिफ व्हेन आई मेट अनिल। वो कह रहा मैं अनिल से मिला तो मैं चोर था। ये अपना कहानी अपने बता सुना रहा हरी सिंह। एंड दो ओनली 15, या 15 ईयर ओल्ड हिज एज वाज, आई वॉज एन एक्सपीरियंस एंड फेयरली सक्सेसफुल हैंड। मैं बहुत अनुभवी था और बहुत सक्सेसफुल हैंड था। यह हैंड का मतलब थिप्स है, चोरी करता था। टाइम कितना? 1 बजे तक, 1 बज के 1 मिनट हो रहा है। चलिए एंड कर देते हैं। We will meet tomorrow.